Hello and welcome to the U Factor. We're dedicating this bi-weekly series to taking the guesswork out of cybersecurity recruitment, career development, mentorship, and everything related. I'm your host, Zainab Zaidi, and I can't wait to continue this series. Join me bi-weekly as I speak with both leaders and upcomers alike on their journeys in the cybersecurity space. I'd like to start off by recognizing that we are on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas and the territory that is covered by the Williams Treaties. We are thankful for the opportunity to learn and grow on the lands of the peoples of Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. Well, you guys are not going to believe it. I have Vivienne Suen with me today. She is actually, I've been a fan, I have to say. She has joined us on several of our sessions. She is one of our speakers. You may have heard her at the Canadian Women in Cybersecurity Conference. And I've got her here with me today. So Vivienne, without further ado, can you introduce yourself for those who don't know you?
Sure. Thanks so much, Zainab. I'm really thrilled to be on this podcast with you. I'm Vivienne Suen. I'm currently a distinguished full stack architect at TD Bank. Most people who might have seen me before would know me as having been at IBM, and I just started this new role 3 weeks ago. So I think this transition it's an interesting time. I've gone through a lot of career introspection in the last month, so the opportunity to talk about that with you today was really timely.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. Honestly, when we were talking at the Canadian Women in Cybersecurity Conference about your move, I was like, you know what? That's it. She's my next guest. It's got to be her. So you just said you're a distinguished architect, which is a really cool title. So tell us a little bit about that. What does a day in the life of a distinguished architect look like?
Yeah, it is a fancy title. The full thing is distinguished full stack architect, and it's like full stack, like doesn't get better than that.
Okay, exactly.
Yeah, but the way that it's defined at TD Bank and in most places, when you get to that level, it's really a technical leadership role. So what I do is I lead a team of security architects, and we own the technology, we own the strategy, we own the roadmap for larger architectural decisions around what the security fabric at the bank looks like. So a lot of my job, is about being a subject matter expert about cybersecurity and being able to guide my team. But I've got some really fantastic skilled experts under me. So it's also being a good people leader and, helping to clear obstacles out of the way, helping to advocate for them at the architecture boards and some of the other milestones in the process. So it's really, it's a combination of being a technical expert, but also being involved in strategy and leadership in a way that felt really right for me. And that was what really attracted me to the job.
So it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I love those kind of roles because it's like, okay, you know what? I get to be on the people side. I get to be on the back end. I think people really make it. Like, I feel like my team is what makes me and drives me every day to show up and be my best self. It's not just about the clients, but it's about the people that work with you or work under you. So we're going to talk a little bit about leadership in just a bit. But I know you were with IBM for quite a bit. You were with your previous org for a while. And I remember when we were chatting at Canadian Women, one of the things that you mentioned was when you were looking at this role was the whole, am I worthy? And for me, it was like, oh my God, this is Vivienne asking me, of course she can do this. But it really hit me how widespread imposter syndrome is. And it surprised me when someone like yourself was talking about how you felt it too. It's something I've dealt with recently. I actually did a post about it after the first episode of the show, which was, when I was first approached to lead the U Factor, my whole thing was, can I do this? Am I good enough? I mean, there's a million other people out there that could do this better. And it took a while. It actually took a lot of encouragement from my team members. I mean, Adi's on the call right now here. He's the one helping us on our production side today. And, it's great hearing that reassurance from others. But how did you get over this hurdle, and how did you get over this to say, you know what, I'm going to make this big of a decision?
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, it's complicated. I think that, imposter syndrome is a very real thing, and lots of people have it. I think some people just hide it better than others. I also really believe that there's a very specific brand of imposter syndrome that plagues women in high tech
Yeah.
in particular. And we could talk probably for hours about, the male dominated industry and blah, blah, blah. That's another podcast, I think.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
think there's definitely a specific type of imposter syndrome that women in high tech have. It's not quite the same as women in other fields. I was very fortunate that I had a really, really good manager about 6 years ago at IBM, who was very vocal about his own imposter syndrome. And we had a lot of really meaningful conversations about it. And I decided after several conversations with him that, you know what, I wasn't going to think about this as feeling like an imposter. Instead, I was going to turn this into a positive and say, you know what, I'm not the smartest person in the room necessarily, but I don't have to be. What I bring to the table is that I listen to other people and I try to understand. What I bring to the table is that I defer to expertise.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be intimidated by somebody who seems to know more than I do. And I'm going to welcome everything as an opportunity to learn. And I'm going to take in everything that I can and figure out what can I take from this that makes me the best version of myself that I can be. So I really, and it's, some days are easier than others. But with imposter syndrome and that whole, oh my God, what am I doing? I've really tried to just flip the script on that and say, you know what I bring to the table is empathy, and I bring humility and honesty. If I don't know something, I'm not going to be the person who sits there and tries to make up an answer, because I've seen how that goes and it never ends well. I will be known as the person who says, I don't know, but I will find out.
Yeah.
So that's what I've tried to do with this. I've tried to turn it into positives,
Yeah.
because one of the things that I've learned is that when we're stressed, and feeling that you're not worthy or feeling that you're put on the spot is very stressful. When
Yeah.
we're stressed, we don't make good decisions because stress literally shuts down the curious part of our brains. So we're less open to new ideas. We're less open to exploring other alternatives. And so clarity is a choice you can make, right? So you can take that moment of uncertainty or not really knowing what you're doing, say, okay, this is really stressful. I have to find a way out of it. Or you can say, this is an opportunity to learn. This
Yeah.
is an opportunity for me to listen. And if I don't know the answers today, I can go and find out, and then I will be better for it. So for me, it's really been about flipping the script, and it's easy to say. It's not always easy to do. But I think that particularly in this industry, with women moving into more visible and more leadership roles, there are a lot of qualities that we bring to the table that are, that a lot of our male colleagues may not, or that offer fresh perspectives at those leadership tables.
I'm really glad that you actually mentioned the fact that, you can always go find an answer. You're not expected to know 100% of your job. And that's one of the things I think people internalize that a lot, where it's like, oh my God, I need to. And then I've been in those situations where I've seen someone try to make up an answer and it goes really poorly. You know what? It's like we've internalized this need to say, I always know the answer. I know everything. And I think it takes a big person to stand up and say, listen, I don't have the answer for you right now, but I will find out for you. And like you said, defer to someone who knows it. We all, I feel like, regardless of whether your team is full of men or women or, people who don't identify as either gender, I don't think it matters. I think if you do defer to someone who knows something a little bit more than you, we're just lifting each other up as we go,
Absolutely.
right? We should never feel shy to say, hey, you know what? Brad might have a better answer than I do, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's one thing that, I tell my team this as well. And I've had this conversation in interviews, which is, I don't need you to know 100% of everything. What I need you to be is scrappy, is, learn how to do the research, because there's an answer out there. I don't need you to know it right now, but I need you to know how to find it. That's really it. And I know we were talking about this earlier, and this is a conversation I've heard through the conference. I've heard it at the Leading Cyber Ladies event I was in a couple of months ago, which is women tend to apply only to positions that they meet, the greater majority of the qualifications for, whereas men tend to shoot their shot for even if they're meeting the bare minimum.
Yeah.
So, this is something that I feel we need to talk about more. We need to talk about imposter syndrome. We need to talk about this because it surprises me how many times when we're in a gathering, women look at each other and say, "Oh my God, you felt that way too," or you've gone through this too. I'm sure you've heard this through the conference. I'm sure you've heard this from friends and colleagues.
Yeah, all the time, all the time. And it's a known thing. There's very much a gender split on that, right? Like women will not apply for a position unless they can tick off every single one of those bullet points. And you could armchair psychologize that all you want. But you and I are chatting about this before. Every position should be an opportunity for growth. So if you're looking at that job description, you say, "Oh, they want 5 years of Python experience, and I only have 3.5." Like, this is an opportunity for growth. You've got enough. And sometimes, it's about having really good people in your corner who will be your cheerleader and who will enable you and encourage you to go ahead and put yourself out there. I've been very lucky in my whole career that I've had really, really good people around me who've encouraged me and helped push me and get me in the right place for opportunities at the right time. I've been very, very fortunate. And I think it's really important, especially as women in this industry, particularly as women of color as well, you have to cultivate those allies because it's not just how we lift each other up, but it's also how we defend each other from microaggressions and, the negative things that can happen. I think a lot of it has to be about that allyship and about having people in your corner because, work is hard. Security is hard. There's so much that you have to do. And I mean, cybersecurity as an industry is only about a decade old. I've worked for, oh my gosh, like over 25 years in high tech. My entire career has been in high tech. And when I started my career, security meant signatures and access control lists. And security architecture meant a little ticky check, a little ticky, check mark at the end of your process. Like, yeah, okay, we've got some authentication.
All done.
We're good. That's
we're secure.
Yeah,
I
yay. And that was fine back then, but it's a completely different world now. It's a different world now than it was 5 years ago, from the security point of view, right? And it's going to be different again. Excuse me. It's going to be different again in another 2 years with the pace of change and the promiscuous nature of cloud, the changing privacy landscape, like all of these factors. It gets more and more complicated, and that's one of the reasons why we literally can't fill those cyber jobs fast enough. We can't train people fast enough to take those positions. So what does this mean? This means everything's an opportunity. This means the job posting that you're reading today might have been written 6 months ago, and who cares if you don't meet all of those? Because the situation could be completely different now. And it really has to require a leap of faith. But in cybersecurity in particular, because it's such a young industry and because there's so much opportunity, I think we really have a cultural opening to take that leap of faith and just, get in there, make those cybersecurity teams more diverse at every level, whether it's threat hunting, SOC operations, eyes on glass, security architecture, privacy, risk and governance. There are so many things that touch that realm. And I think there's plenty of room at the table.
There is, and I think the other thing we need to talk about is that there's a lot of allies. We do have allies out there. I feel like this is a call out, allies. You need to make yourselves known. We've seen the good work that's done. I mean, Kevin McGee is someone, when I spoke to him, amazing. The first thing he said to me when I reached out to him about a speaking opportunity was, "Hey, I've got someone on my team. She's a great female leader in the space. Let me pass my opportunity to her." And to me, I was like, that's step number one. He took an opportunity coming to him and he redirected it. Right. And it's something that could be, so for someone that might be a small move, for someone that might be a big move, but even something like that helped bring light to someone else. Right. So share your light, let your teams know. And for those of you who are approaching cybersecurity, and I've been watching Twitter over the past little bit, I've been looking at some of the LinkedIn posts. There are, especially those from the younger generation, that are nervous entering cybersecurity because they feel like it's just a men's zone, and that's not correct. You're seeing people like Vivienne who are really pushing, and they're continuing this journey so that you can follow in their footsteps. Vivienne's fought the good fight for you. So join in.
There's lots of niches in cybersecurity where someone can land. I was part of a women in security excelling group that IBM sponsored last May. And it was like a whole day of education seminars, but like the diversity of women we had speaking at that, like I came in as a security architect and I was talking about like security controls, where and how we leverage them. We had somebody else on the call who's a threat hunter. She's a master threat hunter, right? We had other people who are security consultants. Jennifer Wennikers does a podcast called Out of Band. She's in either Belgium or Luxembourg. But yeah, and she's a security consultant for IBM in the Benelux region. And so, you had all these women who absolutely serious subject matter expertise in different aspects of cybersecurity. But if your superpower is that you're very good at a consultative approach and you work really well with clients and helping them break down their problems and solve them, lots of gigs in security consulting. If you're in a technical background, lots of places where you can apply yourself. And it doesn't have to all be about network infrastructure, right? Exactly. There's a lot of work that has to be done around privacy, risk and compliance. There's a lot of stuff that has to be done around data security and application security. If you're already working in software development, the more you can learn about DevSecOps, the more opportunities you're going to have coming down the pipe, right? Because everyone's starting to look at software supply chain, especially in the wake of, Log4j and SolarWinds and all of these software supply chain breaches.
Yeah. And it's not just the technical side. There's a whole non-technical aspect to cybersecurity. I'm there, folks. I'm on the marketing side, which is, I know that's one thing that people don't realize. There's a whole other side to this. There are so many non-technical positions as well, if the tech side is not for you. But if it is, you've heard it directly here from Vivienne, there's so many opportunities. And not to mention, I'm going to go back to an earlier point that you made, Vivienne, which was you need to find a tribe. You need to find your squad. You need to find people. And it doesn't need to be, it could be people you work with. It could be your friends. And they don't necessarily need to even be in the field you're in. You just need to find that group that supports you. One of the things that we saw at the event was, women who've come together that they've met either at work or they met doing a course together, and then they were supporting each other. And they're like, you know what, when our annual raises or our annual performance reviews come up, we usually have a conversation and we hype each other up before they go in to have that conversation about a potential raise. So there's so many organizations. If you feel like you're new to the space or you feel like you haven't really found your tribe, there's so many organizations you can reach out to. There's WeSys, there's Leading Cyber Ladies, there's so many organizations like this out there that you can connect with. There's Women in Tech. Take a look at the Cyber Exchange page that you're on right now. Click on Canadian Women in Cybersecurity. We've highlighted a slew of partners that that offer these kind of community connections. And again, like Vivienne said, so many excellent speakers. Take a look at the Canadian Women in Cybersecurity on demand page. You'll see so many powerful women that are speaking and that are involved in these sessions. Reach out to them, reach out to me, reach out to Vivienne. Unless you hit that connect button on LinkedIn or that message button on LinkedIn, you won't know. Take a leap of faith. Click on that apply button. If you've looked at a position over the past week, Vivienne and I are telling you, we're your tribe right now. Click apply, because it's until you do it, you won't know. And like Vivienne said, sometimes that position was written 6 months ago. And it's written by a hiring manager who sometimes, or an HR person who may not necessarily be the hiring manager. And when the hiring manager looks at your resume, you might be a perfect fit, right? And again, like we both said, you need to grow in your position. So if you've hit 100% of this job requirement, this job's not for you, my friend, because you're not going to grow in here. This is something you've already done. So talking a little bit about that, and I'm going to kind of pivot in a completely different direction, because we've talked about how important leadership is. So talk to me a little about your leadership style, Vivienne, and how do you work with your team?
Yeah. So I've always been a big believer in leading by example. I think it's, the things that have mattered the most to me in every job that I've been in are the people around me. So I've always worked really hard at cultivating relationships. I've worked really hard to develop professional empathy. And I think, frankly, I think that's one of my superpowers. In terms of a leadership style, I'm very fortunate that I've had teams that I've worked on that have really valued authenticity. And everyone's really been encouraged to bring their whole selves to the table. And, you get a sense of this. Everyone, you get a sense of how genuine an organization is about that very, very quickly. In the role that I am now, I realized like within my first 2 days that everybody I'd interviewed with, yeah, they're exactly the same now that I'm part of the team. And that's been one of the most exciting things about joining this team that I'm on. Interestingly enough, I have two friends, both older white men, who in the past couple of years applied for very senior positions in their respective fields and did not get them. And both of them were told that it was because they didn't demonstrate enough empathy or enough vulnerability.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which I thought was super interesting because
Very interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know them professionally. I know them socially, and
Yeah.
like in socially, I think they're just the biggest teddy bears. But I was like, this is an interesting time for you to think about your work persona and
Yeah.
what you're putting out there, right? And I see this more and more, especially when you start looking at leadership positions. People want someone who can demonstrate empathy. They want people who are good communicators. And or at least the roles that I'm attracted to, that's what they want. So I'm very much in terms of leadership style, I'm very much about being able to communicate and connect with others, about being able to take complicated things and make them easy for non-experts to understand. And I've been very much about leading by example.
Right. And you know what? That's actually very important that you bring this up because soft skills are something that Danielle and I were talking about during Cyber Exchange 3.0 when we did our session on recruitment. One of the things we talked about was the trainable soft skills. But I find it so interesting that this is something that they got turned down for on a position. And like you said, socially, there's something else, but their professional persona might not be telling that same story.
Yeah.
Often, I feel like sometimes we feel like we have to portray this this personality where it's like my guard's up and I'm super serious and all of this stuff. And inside you're actually completely different. So I find that very interesting that they got turned down for those reasons. But I agree with you. One of the things that I'm training in my team is soft skills, and this is what I look for in my team is soft skills, because your technical skills you can learn. Soft skills are one of those things that either you have that in you to develop or you don't. And don't get me wrong, there's certain positions where you don't need soft skills because it's a specifically technical position, and there are people made for those positions and they're incredibly happy there because they don't want to deal with other people.
Yeah.
And that's okay. If that's your personality, that's okay. But if you're in a position where you're working with people on a day-to-day basis, or you've got face time with customers and clients, the soft skills become incredibly important. So I'm really, really happy that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's a big deal to me. I mean, for me, technology has never been the difficult part of my job.
Yeah.
I have a computer science degree and I've worked my entire career in high tech. And for me, the tech has never been the hard part. I'll figure it out. I'll learn it, right? Software development has changed so dramatically from when I started, and that doesn't faze me. The principles of good architecture are still the principles of good architecture.
Architecture, yeah.
Exactly. But for me, what's really made people memorable as I've worked my way up the ladder is I remember the connections I've made, and I remember the people I've made connections with. And I think, it's different at different points in your career. When you're first out of school and you're working, you have a job, right?
Yes.
You're just trying to work a job. And it's not for some time that you start thinking about in terms of career. And it's not until even later after that it becomes a capital C
Yeah.
career and the realization that, oh no, I have grown up. What is it that I want to be now?
Yeah.
And it's different concerns at different points in time. But again, I think this is where having a good network, having your squad around you, people who will encourage you to think outside the box, people who will help keep the curious part of your brain activated. I think that's really important.
Yeah, we were talking about that, where it's like you ask what do I want to be when I grow up? When you're in like the second, you're like in the second thirds of your career, and you're like, oh,
Oh
what do I
man.
actually want to be?
Yeah,
What is it
my
that I want to
husband
do?
was on a call not that long ago with a financial advisor, and the guy was like, how old are you? How many years for retirement? How many years till your wife retires? And he threw out I'm not giving away the number because I looked at him, I was like, oh my
Oh my
God.
God, yeah.
I I thought I had decades to go. I don't actually. That's really scary.
I know. Oh my God.
You said something earlier, Zainab, that I really liked when you used the word scrappy, like
Yeah.
specifically that word. I love that. Like I'm a huge fan of musical theater, and I literally have a sticker on my laptop that says "Young, Scrappy, and Hungry"
Oh my God.
from Hamilton. But I think that's a state of mind
Yeah.
that is important, especially if you work in cybersecurity, right? You've got to stay scrappy. You've got to stay curious because the game and the playing field keep changing all the time, and there's no room for complacency. Anyone who gets comfortable in a rut is not going to last very long in this industry. You're going to get aged out, or your skills won't be relevant anymore, and you've got to stay scrappy and you've got to stay curious.
And if anything was an indication of that, look at the past 2 years. If you did things the way you learned them in school, whether it was marketing or cyber or whatever, or sales, whatever side you were on, you were impacted. If you didn't learn how to move with the flow, you got left behind. It's the unfortunate reality. And, I think that's where, like you said, complacency, you have to, that's like, I think the biggest threat to you as a professional is complacency. Don't let yourself fall into that rut. I'm just going to quickly talk about one thing, which was my when I was coming through my career. Like you said, Vivienne, it's so important because you remember the connections you made with people. But I also remembered the bad things. I remembered the way I didn't want to be treated by some of my leadership. And that's one thing, like as much as I apply all the good stuff I've learned and all the good stuff I've developed, I always keep it top of mind, even now, to go, these things you didn't like. Make sure you're not doing them to your team. I feel like that's incredibly important. We need to learn. I feel like you shouldn't sit there like I'm not upset with how I was treated in the past. I got over that, which was, that was their leadership style. I'm going to take that was still a learning experience for me. Even the most terrible things that have happened, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this. I'm going to make sure this never happens on this end. And I'm going to make sure that, I'm promoting my team and I'm, talking to them and continuing to push them. That's the only way to show a faith in your team, is to help them continuously develop.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about this, I wanted to talk about you were at IBM for a while. You had quite the tenure there, and then you made this move. How has this transition been for you? How has it been? Exciting? Has it been scary? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I guess the glib answer is that I'm still in this lovely basement office, but now
Hey, I'm in the basement office too.
yeah. So I mean that hasn't changed. But now the background on my laptop is green and not blue. That said, I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of figuring out the new processes and the culture of the new workplace and all that. But it was. I think that for anyone who's been somewhere for a long time, you really need to start asking yourself, are you still growing? And what are the opportunities to do that? And I was happy where I was, right? But I was ready to do the next big thing. And it's been a huge leap of faith. And I don't know, we can talk again in a year and we'll see how that's gone. But I think you kind of reach that point where you have to decide that you're ready to do it. And again, I have a really great network of, friends and my husband behind me to say, yeah, like, go for it. You're awesome.
Yeah. And you are awesome. You are incredibly awesome. But the reason why I ask this question is because I get this a lot, which is like, I'm so comfortable in my position. I'm so scared of what's out there. You know what? And I actually had a friend recently who's been in a position for about 15 years. And, from everything she's told us, she's in a very toxic environment and was so scared to leave because she was like, what if I go to someplace worse? What if it goes like, everything seems like
Yeah.
the grass is greener. And then you get there and you're like, oh no, this is like, quicksand, when it's actually worse on the other side. So I wanted to highlight your story because this was a positive. I mean,
Right.
it's not like you came from a positive experience with a positive experience and moved into a positive experience. Like it was all kind of like hey, you know what? You don't have to wait until that position where you're like, oh my God, I hate it here before you move. You can leave an organization that you love still just because you feel like you've hit your growth threshold, right? You're not growing
Yep.
anymore, and it's good for you and it's good for the organization, right? I feel like that it gives a bit of fresh air to you, and it gives a fresh air to your role. Not saying that you've stagnated, but I feel like I feel like it's important. I feel like change is important.
It is important. Life is a work in progress. I think it's important that you're always running towards something and not just away from it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you've got to be realistic. If you work for a big company, every big company has its own brand of crap.
Yeah.
And just because you're used to crap at one place, like there's going to be different crap everywhere that you go. And that's just the nature of the world that we live in, right?
Yeah.
But everywhere you go, again, I try to flip the script and stay positive and say, okay, like what have I learned about overcoming this kind of challenge? And if you're in a place where you think, you know what, I'm just sick and tired of dealing with these particular challenges, that's a good indicator it's time for a change. If there's certain ways that you if you're not growing the way that you want to, or you're not getting those opportunities, that's a good opportunity for a change. I will say one of the nice things about a big company like IBM is that there's a lot of room to move around and stay in the same company, with the same culture and maybe even a lot of the same extended team, but then move to different roles and do different things. So I was really blessed during my 16 years at IBM that I worked in 3 different business units.
Yeah.
And really got like a breadth across the corporation. That's the nice thing about big companies, but there's I've also worked at a software startup at an earlier point in my career, and then being part of a small, lean organization where everyone had to cover many disciplines because we only had a handful of people.
Yeah.
That's a really unique challenge too. And I think in the tech industry, you have opportunities to explore all of that, and it just makes you a more well-rounded professional at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you should find what works for you. For example, am someone who I love wearing multiple hats, and I could do that, but it doesn't work the same for everybody. And you know what? Like you said, big organizations, they give you that room to say, okay, you know what? I will find a spot here somewhere and I will continue to grow here because this place is massive. So you have to find what works for you. If you are comfortable in small startup organizations or small media, like if you're okay with the SMB side, great, go for it. If you want to work in enterprise, aim for it, right? Always keep your goal top of mind as you're growing through this. And I'm going to tie that into a little bit on the coaching and mentorship. I feel like that's something that is incredibly important regardless of what role you're at, whether you're starting new or you've been in a position for 20 years. I feel like you constantly need someone to help guide you so that you're not, just to kind of reevaluate where am I at? Am I happy in my role? Is my role fitting for me? What are next steps looking like for me? Do you have anyone that you feel provides you with guidance, Vivienne, or what are your thoughts on coaching and mentorship?
Oh, wow. I think that it's really important to have different coaches for different things.
Yeah.
The best coaching relationships are the ones that are very specific,
Yeah.
right? About like, this is what I can learn from you. I think, and I've had lots of different coaches throughout my career for different aspects of things. I've had people who've been, very, very much technical coaches.
Yeah.
Just like brain dump as much of your technical expertise on me as you can, right?
Yeah.
I've had people who've, coached me on different aspects of leadership and career development and so on. I had one career mentor at IBM who pushed me to make my first big move from when business unit to another. And it was one of the best moves that I've made, to stretch my wings a little bit more and set me on the path towards where I am now. So I think, and at the same time, you get to a certain level where I think it's really important that you and yourself are coaching people.
Yeah.
I try to always have, a couple people at all times that I'm doing some kind of mentoring with.
Yeah.
And again, the best relationships are the ones that are very specific around, what you're getting from each other.
I think that you hit the nail on the head with that. Being a coach and being a mentor teaches you so much more than if you were just in a one-sided relationship. It's great to get and to be a mentee or to be a coachee, but when you give back, and you can give back at any stage of your career. You don't have to have 15 years of experience behind you before you can turn around and say, even like, even if you've been in the industry for 6 months, listen, you're 6 months ahead of someone just starting out. You
Yeah.
might have some key advice for them. So never feel like, oh my God, how can I be a coach or how can I be a mentor? Because when you're talking to someone, you will learn. And you know what? You might help someone out. And, it could be as simple as, I don't even know where to start applying for. And you know what? The little bit of advice that you provide could literally change the trajectory of someone's life and career. So don't take it lightly. Absolutely. Like I love that, Vivienne, that you said, you kind of have like a mental quota. You're like, I'm going to take on a couple at a time, make sure that because you have to also balance your time. I think that's one thing that's incredibly important is that work-life balance. And I think you need to kind of make sure that you're not overextending, and that you're doing right by the people that you're working with. So I think that's incredibly, incredibly important point. If you're looking for mentors or coaches, it's a great place. I mean, check out humintcareers.ca. There's tons of industry leaders there. You can check out other organizations that have coaching and mentorship. There's you literally just have to put in the words into Google. Trust me, you will find it. It's everywhere. And again, like I mentioned, on the Cyber Exchange platform here, feel free to connect. There's so many groups. There's so many people on the platform. There is, ample opportunity for you to connect with different potential mentors and coaches. So please make sure that you're using the platform to your full advantage, and taking out of it what it is. If you're lost on that journey, connect with me. I will find someone for you. Trust me, we've got you think that people are not willing to coach, but like you just heard from Vivienne, she's got 3 or 4 on the go at a time. So everyone's willing to help. You just need to ask. I think that's really it. So I'm going to circle back to, we started talking about imposter syndrome. I'm going to circle back to it because one of the things I feel like we kind of need to close off with is just imparting that advice. For some people, imposter syndrome is crippling. It's not just, like for you and I, it was kind of like, oh my God, okay, can I do this? And then you hear from others, you kind of walk yourself through it and then you push out the other end. But for those who are really feeling it and maybe have not found their tribe or maybe are having a hard time even believing what their tribe is telling them. Any advice for them, Vivienne?
Oh boy.
It's a rough one. Sorry.
It is a rough one, and I really empathize. Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is just the way that we label a very specific type of, a lack of confidence, right? That's really what it is.
Absolutely.
And like anything else, if it's at the point where it is crippling you or it's keeping you from going after the things that you want, then I think it probably behooves, a good hard look at who you have around you and whether or not those people are building you up. And where is this coming from? We all have our insecurity and anxiety demons. I have no shortage of 3 a.m. anxiety fuel myself. I get it. But, when it starts getting to the point where, it is crippling, then you have to ask yourself, like, am I even doing something that I'm motivated by?
Yeah.
If it's this hard for me to feel like I've, to really feel or believe in my own expertise. Am I in a toxic environment with people who undermine me or don't give me credit for what I do? And is that what's keeping me down? Because there's all kinds of things that keep us down. It's exhausting some days, and it can be really hard. I get it.
I'm with you. And that's, I think you hit the nail on the head with that comment, which is look around you. what are you surrounded by? Is it your workplace culture? Is it the people around you? What is it that's causing this lack of confidence? And sometimes it's because, our leaders have put us down, or our colleagues are putting us down, or it's just the way, and I've heard this from when I've walked into different organizations when I was doing consulting, and I was helping out on the operational end. The one thing I heard from team members, which is, I don't feel recognized. I'm turning in item after item that I know is winning business or is doing XYZ, but no one's turning around and saying, good job. And that's so important. It is so important to provide that recognition. So take a look. Maybe it's the environment around you. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not just in you. Maybe it is something you're picking up and something that you are feeling. And at that point, like Vivienne said, you need to really, really evaluate, and you need to pull yourself out of an environment like this, right?
Yeah.
Talk to someone, and you know what? Sometimes sometimes it actually is easier to talk to a stranger than it is to talk to someone that you know really well. You know what? Try that. It might help. You never know. It might not be for everybody, but something to try.
One of the things about recognition that drives me up the wall, and you see this I don't think you see this as much in, corporate workplace culture as you used to, but all of the recognition that goes to like the heroic last ditch effort, fighting fires up till 3 a.m., really save this problem. Okay, that's great. And it clearly had to be done. But where is the recognition for the person who just turns in their code release after release and never breaks anything?
Yeah.
Like where's the thank you lunch and the dinner out for that person who, didn't break anything in the first place? And I think I used to talk with people a lot about this, I guess in the late 90s and like early 2000s, about this aspect of workplace culture, and that we reward that heroic effort.
Yeah.
But I mean, who do you want on your team? Like the people who stayed up all night to fix that critical bug that shouldn't have gotten through, or the people who are just getting it done, doing the right things, not breaking stuff?
Yeah. I feel like there needs to be an I didn't break anything award.
I know, right?
No, I'm with you. Sometimes it feels like the things that can seem a little mundane, or things that are day-to-day items, do go unrecognized. And that's one thing that we've tried to, even at cyberX, at Humint, one of the things we try to do is keep the team motivated through constant, let's celebrate. Let's celebrate what the wins are. And it can be something as small as, oh my God, this image looks great. It is fantastic. I mean, if you looked at our marketing, we pump out images constantly, and we celebrate them as they're created, because we like to, we like to turn around and say, you know what, you've put effort, you've put time into this. Let's celebrate it. So something even as simple as that, something as simple as, oh my God, we created a signature line. Woohoo, let's celebrate that. Because I'm with you. We need an I didn't break anything award. That's for sure. Okay, so we are quickly coming up on time. I mean, it's been such a great conversation, Vivienne. I didn't even notice time just flying out. So I'm going to bring us, I always ask this question at the end, because I feel like any platform provided to us, we need to turn around and help people, and to continue to amplify people. So I will ask you to amplify a diverse voice. So it could be anyone that has made an impact on you. Maybe it's someone you've worked with. So if you can amplify a diverse voice for me and tell me why you're amplifying this person.
Sure. I'm going to talk. I want to mention Dr. Laura Jones, who I had the pleasure of participating in an International Women's Day panel with a few months ago. Dr. Jones is a risk management executive, and she's based in Atlanta. And she is just, she knows her stuff, and she's amazing. And some of the stories that she had around allyship and the people that she's helped to bring up along the way, and some of the help she's had along the way, were really, really inspiring for me. It was a really lovely panel where we talked about women of color in cybersecurity specifically. And some of the barriers we face and how to overcome them. And a lot of my thinking about, having your allies and having your squad and your cheerleaders came from the preparatory discussions that we had for that panel and the event itself.
I love that. So we're going to tag Dr. Jones on LinkedIn. We're going to tag her in the comments. That you're going to see one of my staff members is going to drop a link to her LinkedIn profile. That's incredible, and we're going to ensure that we continue to amplify her voice. This is what it's all about. It's all about, like you heard from Vivienne, someone she learned from, someone that she turns around, wants to thank for just imparting wisdom. So this is amazing. Well, Vivienne, thank you so much for joining me today. I have absolutely loved the conversation. If you guys want to reach out to Vivienne, she is on LinkedIn. She's on the Cyber Exchange platform. We'll drop her LinkedIn link as well. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. If you have any thoughts on different topics you'd like to hear about, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And otherwise, we'll see you in another 2 weeks where we continue the conversation with another guest. Thank you for joining us, and stay safe out there.